She blinked. "That's not what the schedule said." He didn't reply. His hands tightened on the wheel. The bus rattled through another stretch of rain-slick streets, darker and emptier than the ones before. Mira glanced down the aisle again. The pale man was standing. Her breath caught, a sharp inhale that made her throat ache. She blinked. When her eyes adjusted, he was seated again, unmoving, head bowed. Had she imagined it? The windows rattled and a cold draft swept through the cabin. Mira hugged her coat tighter around her body. She tried to ignore the man, staring fixedly at the driver's cap. She counted the seconds with the rhythm of the windshield wipers. Then, tap, a soft sound from behind. Her heart hammered. She strained her ears. The bus engine roared. The rain battered the glass, but beneath it all, faintly, there it was again. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, rhythmic, like fingernails against metal. Mira's hands clenched into fists. She refused to turn around. "Sir?" she called shakily to the driver. "I hear something." "Someone is back there. I swear it." The driver didn't look at her. His voice was low, gruff. "Best not to pay attention." "What?" He said nothing more. His face remained hidden in the shadows, eyes locked forward. Mira's chest felt tight. She stood abruptly, her knees trembling. She walked halfway down the aisle, heart pounding with every step. The back row waited. The pale man's head was bowed, but the closer she came, the more details emerged. Skin stretched too thin, veins blue beneath the surface, lips cracked and colorless. His clothes looked wrong, too, out of place, old-fashioned like something out of a photograph. Her voice trembled. "Hello?" The man didn't move. She leaned forward slightly. "Can you hear me?" His head twitched. Just a fraction. A movement so subtle it might have been her imagination. Then, so softly she wasn't sure if the words came from him or from inside her own head. She heard, "You shouldn't have gotten on." Mira gasped and stumbled back. Her heel caught on the edge of a seat and she nearly fell. She clutched the rail to steady herself, her breaths coming in sharp, shallow bursts. She turned and bolted back up the aisle toward the front, collapsing into the seat nearest the driver. "Who is he?" she demanded. Her voice broke. "What is going on?" The driver didn't answer right away. The bus rumbled through another unfamiliar street, and for a moment, Mira thought he wouldn't speak at all. Then, without looking at her, he muttered, "There are things that ride this bus sometimes, things that don't belong. Best not to look at them. Best not to listen." Her mouth went dry. "What are you saying?" Finally, the driver turned his head just enough for her to see his eyes in the mirror. They were wide, bloodshot, filled with something she couldn't name. "You were supposed to be the last passenger tonight." The words clung to Mira like ice. "You were supposed to be the last passenger tonight." Her throat tightened. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, but her voice cracked, small against the growl of the storm. The driver didn't answer. His hands gripped the wheel as if welded there. His knuckles shone bone white in the dashboard glow. Mira glanced down the aisle again. The pale man was closer, not seated at the very back anymore. He now occupied a row 5 seats nearer. Same bowed head, same limp hands resting on knees, but his position had changed. He hadn't stood. She hadn't seen him move. Yet somehow, impossibly, he was closer. Her stomach lurched. "Sir," she whispered, "he's moving." The driver's jaw clenched. "Don't acknowledge him." Mira's skin prickled. She wrapped her arms around herself, her mind racing. "This isn't real. This is some nightmare. I'll wake up soon." But the cold biting into her bones was real. The damp clothes clinging to her were real. The bus shuddering through unfamiliar streets was real. She risked another glance at the reflection in the window. The pale man's head was raised again. His eyes were black pits, and his mouth stretched into a thin, jagged grin. She spun around, bowed head, still as stone. Terror pulsed through her veins. "What happens if I do acknowledge him?" she whispered. The driver didn't look at her. His voice was hoarse. "Then he won't stop until you leave with him." Mira's heart pounded. "Leave where?" The driver's silence was worse than an answer. The bus groaned as it climbed a hill Mira didn't recognize. Buildings had vanished. Now only skeletal trees lined the road, their branches clawing at the storm. The street lamps were gone. Darkness pressed in against the windows, thick and suffocating. A sound rose from the back of the bus. Not the steady tap, tap, tap from before, but something wet. A dragging noise, like bare feet sliding along the floor. Mira clamped a hand over her mouth. She didn't want to turn, but she couldn't stop herself. The pale man was standing. The rain had been falling all day, but by the time Mira left the office, it had transformed into a storm. Wind howled through the narrow streets, carrying scraps of paper and waterlogged leaves in dizzying spirals. The city looked hollow, emptied of its usual neon buzz. Shop fronts were shuttered, sidewalks abandoned, and the street lamps flickered like dying fireflies. Her umbrella had snapped in the wind half a block from the bus stop. By the time she ducked under the shelter, Mira's coat clung to her like a second skin, soaked through. The timetable on the side of the shelter wavered in the weak light. The 11:58 p.m. bus was the last one heading toward her part of town. Miss it, and she would be stranded. She hugged her bag closer, tapping her foot against the wet concrete. A gust of wind shrieked through the shelter, making her shiver. Then, almost on cue, headlights cut through the sheets of rain, and the lumbering shape of the bus approached. The brakes screamed against wet asphalt as it pulled up. The doors hissed open. Mira stepped inside, greeted by the scent of damp fabric and old rubber. The interior lights cast a harsh glow that made everything look drained of color. Every seat was empty, except for one. At the very back, a man sat still, as though he had been waiting not just for the bus, but for her. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched thin over sharp cheekbones. His hair hung in wet strands, black as oil, plastered to his forehead. His hands rested on his knees, long fingers stiff and unmoving. His head tilted downward, eyes fixed on the floor. Mira's heart gave a small, anxious flutter. She chose a seat halfway down the aisle, close enough to the driver, but not so near that she looked afraid. The doors closed with a sigh, and the bus pulled back into the storm. The sound of the rain against the windows was relentless. It drowned out the hum of the engine, the occasional creak of metal. Outside, the city blurred into a smear of lights and shadows. Inside, the pale man didn't move. Stop after stop passed. The bus slowed, the doors opened, but no one got on. No one was waiting in the storm. Each time, Mira's eyes flicked to the back, half expecting him to stand, to leave, to prove he was just an ordinary passenger. But he never stirred. Her gaze shifted to the window beside her. The glass was fogged, but in the reflection she could see the length of the bus behind her. The pale man was no longer staring at the floor. In the reflection, his head was raised. His eyes, dark, hollow, endless, were fixed on her. Mira's breath caught. Slowly, carefully, she turned in her seat. But when she looked directly, his head was still bowed. Her pulse quickened. She told herself it was a trick of the light, the distortion of glass and rain. She rubbed her eyes, took a deep breath, and faced forward again. The bus rattled on. The driver was a thick-set man in a cap, his face mostly hidden in shadow, eyes fixed on the road. He seemed oblivious to the strange silence in the cabin. Mira bit her lip, debating. Then, leaning forward slightly, she whispered, "Excuse me." The driver grunted, not looking away from the road. "Who is that man at the back?" she asked softly. Her voice trembled despite her effort to sound casual. The driver's brow furrowed. He glanced at the mirror, eyes scanning the bus. Then he looked at her. Confusion etched deep into his face. "What man?" he said. His voice was flat, almost offended. "You're the only one on this bus." Mira froze in her seat. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She turned in her seat again, her eyes dragged like weights toward the back. The pale man was still there, head bowed, hands motionless on his knees. She could see him as clearly as the poles and the torn advertisements along the bus walls. Her voice returned in a whisper. "He's right there, at the back. Can't you see him?" The driver shook his head, his jaw tightening. "Miss, I don't know what you think you're seeing, but there's nobody there." The words made her stomach churn. Nobody there. The bus lurched forward, hitting a pothole, and Mira clutched the rail of her seat. In the reflection of the window, she saw the pale man again, his head raised, eyes fixed on her. She could swear his lips moved, just slightly, like a murmur carried by the rain. She spun around, head bowed again, silent, her skin prickled. She felt watched, no matter where she looked. "You're tired," she told herself. "Overworked. Storms make people see things." But the certainty with which the driver had spoken haunted her. The bus took a turn. Mira frowned. This wasn't her usual route. She knew the streets well. She had taken this bus for years. But the landmarks were wrong. Street signs she didn't recognize slid past in the darkness. "Excuse me," she called out, louder this time. "Is this still going toward Riverside?" The driver gave a short, clipped answer. "End of the line." Slowly, impossibly, he was rising from his seat. His head lifted at last, revealing eyes so dark they seemed to swallow the weak light of the bus. His mouth parted, and Mira heard the faint rasp of air, though his chest did not move. Step. One foot dragged forward, then the other. His limbs moved stiffly, unnaturally, as though he were being pulled by invisible strings. Mira bolted from her seat and gripped the driver's arm. "Stop the bus! Stop it now!" The driver didn't react. His eyes were fixed on the road, his face pale and grim. "I can't. Once he boards, we ride to the end." What does that mean? But her words were drowned out by the dragging steps behind her, growing closer. She spun around. The pale man was halfway up the aisle now, his face slack, his mouth twisting into something almost like a smile. His gaze pinned her in place, unblinking, bottomless. Mira backed away, pressing against the driver's seat. "Please, just stop the bus!" The driver's voice was a whisper. "If I stop, we'll both be trapped." The pale man's arm jerked upward. His hand reached out, not toward the driver, but toward her. Fingers long and gray, tipped with cracked nails, trembling as though with hunger. "No," Mira breathed. She shoved past the driver, reaching for the door controls. The buttons were worn, slick under her hands, but she slammed them down. Nothing happened. The doors remained shut, sealed as if welded. She tried again, slamming her palm against the button until it hurt. Still nothing. Behind her, the dragging steps had stopped. Slowly, she turned her head. The pale man was inches away. His face hovered just beyond her shoulder, his cold breath grazing her neck, though his chest did not rise. His lips parted, and in a voice that was both whisper and echo, he spoke. "You shouldn't have gotten on," Mira screamed. She shoved herself against the driver, nearly toppling him. The bus swerved, tires skidding on the wet road, before the driver yanked the wheels straight again. "Sit down," he roared. It was the first time she'd heard anger in his voice. "You'll make it worse." But Mira couldn't. She clung to the rail, her whole body shaking. The pale man hadn't advanced further. He just stood there, watching, head tilted as though curious. His black eyes glittered with something unreadable. The bus plunged deeper into the dark, leaving the storm behind. The rain faded. The sound of the world outside vanished. When Mira dared to glance out the window, her stomach dropped. There was nothing out there. No trees, no buildings, no road. Only blackness, endless and absolute, as if the bus floated through a void. She turned on the driver. Where are we? What is this? His face was stone. The end of the line.